men's movement with our host, Dr. Jack Rocco. Dr. Jack, how are you? And you and I are Penguin fans, and our guest today is I remember how we knocked him out before he won that cup, the Penguins, and I even went back and watched it again, and I said, holy cow, I would never thought I would be having the person's probably a better general than Craig Patrick. When think about specifically, how architects of things, but who's our guest today?
Yeah, we have Neil Smith here from the New York Rangers. Now, tell us about your career, Neil. When were you with the Rangers?
I got to the Rangers in 1989 after a 7-year stint with Detroit Red Wings as the chief scout, and I stayed with the Rangers until 2000.
Okay. Now, what are you doing now? I know you've made a transition out of hockey, and you have a foundation or you have a program that you're working with now?
I'm working with a lot of different things on my own ticket, I guess you would say. The one employment that I still have is I work for UBS, the bank, and they have the naming rights to the beautiful arena on Long Island called UBS Arena. And I go to all the New York Islander games to meet clients and shake hands and try to make the experience of going to a hockey game a better one by me being there and greeting these people.
Nice. Now, where are you located right now? Where do you live?
I'm in Greenville, South Carolina.
Okay. You're not far from me. I'm in Charlotte right now.
Oh, you're 90 miles away.
North Carolina. Yeah. You're very close. Okay. Are you a Clemson fan as well?
No, I'm not a Clemson or USC.
USA. Green. How do they pronounce it? Greenville.
Yeah. I guess. I don't know. I haven't paid much attention to all that stuff. As soon as I got here, I saw all those tiger paws all over the place, and then I saw the Gamecocks. It's only in South Carolina that you could get a T-shirt that says, "We love our cock."
We love our cocks here at the Ultimate Men's Clinic and the Ultimate Men's Movement as well. So you're a perfect fit for us, Neil. So I thank you for coming on.
And you're not part of the Village people either, Jack.
No, we take all.
Oh, I understand that.
Now, what is your experience with, because we deal with the men's clinic. I always say for men that when it comes to health, it's not so much the little head as it is the big head. I think a lot of men's issues frequently come from insecurities. They come from just that warrior mindset of show no weakness, show no fear, face the problems, deal with it on your own, the rugged individualist. Now, with your athletes it's a similar transition, I would imagine, coming out of the NHL and going into the private world. Now, how do you deal with a lot of these guys as they're transitioning out of hockey back into the real world? And how do you make that transition? And tell us a little bit about what that's like.
It's really helping people go through that transition is just really saying that you understand. And I don't think it's any different than when I'm doing grief counseling with people or I meet people that's survivors of suicide and trying to help them. They're at a point in their life that they don't really understand and they wonder if they're going to make. Same thing with guys who end their careers where their identity was so tied to them. They wonder whether they're going to be able to make it because they've never been in a world where they don't have this identity. And the same thing as if you're a husband, wife, sister, brother, whatever you are, and you lose one of your family members, your identity is really changing. And someone's got to be there to say to you, I know where you are, but you will survive. You will go on to be okay. I know you miss the locker room. I know you miss the robotic lifestyle that a professional athlete lives, but we're going to have to transition to a non-robotic lifestyle and start to figure this thing out because the locker room is gone, the itineraries are gone, the team meals are gone, and we're going to have to learn how people do it in the real world. And I know exactly where you're at in this. And it's the same thing with all these transitions out of things. And to comment on the men before I give it back to you, I do a lot of work with people that have lost a loved one. And particularly, I did survivors of suicide. And what I found with those groups, and it was so odd, I'm 6 years out on it now, is that a husband and wife would show up to commiserate about their loss of a child or of whoever it was. They would be there for the first meeting. The husband would never come back. And so I found myself usually at these meetings once a month, me and 10, because I was the only one of the men who allowed myself to be vulnerable and say how I felt and say where I was at. You said it, Dr. Jack, earlier, men don't want to be vulnerable. It's everything they're taught is don't be vulnerable, because that's a weakness. And what you find with husbands and wives who are going through any of these transitions is they battle because the wife is handling that transition in a totally different way than the husband handles it. And the husband doesn't want to handle it the way the wife is handling it. And they end up in battles and often, unfortunately, in divorce.
Yeah. My transition, I think we all go through those transitions in life, from the military to civilian life. I wrote a book called Recycled. It was my adoption journey. And I had a very blessed, idyllic adoption in a lot of respects. But then in my 40s and 50s, there were some bombshells that came out of the closet as I was finding my birth family. And you talk about loss and transition. And for me, there was a lot of loss of self. That I grew up in this idyllic Italian family, loved my family, the pasta on Sundays, the whole nine. And then I find my birth mother, and it turns out that her family came into the country on the Mayflower. So now, all of a sudden, I've got this transition from this Italian immigrant struggling family to make it in the land of opportunity. And then we go to find my father's family, and that side of the family came in on slave ships. My father was mixed race. He was light-skinned, and my mother was white, my birth mother. And then I was adopted into this Italian family. Which me is me? Am I this Italian immigrant kid? Am I this privileged pilgrim kid? Or am I a descendant of slaves? And all those. The loss of self and the loss of your identity, it was a big part of my transition. Same thing, I'm sure hockey players, football players, any of these athletes, they're prima donnas their whole life. They grow up in the leagues, they're the chosen one, they're the special child. They get into the NHL, they're realizing their dreams. And then I would imagine, like many of these things, the tires screech as it comes to an end. And you get off the train and you're like, now what? It's got to be a difficult transition. What role do you play in that transition with your counseling groups? And how do you get these guys to open up who've never thought about anything personal, anything from the heart?
I think it's just commiserating with them and understanding where they're at and speaking the same language that they speak. And I would imagine that it's got to be the same for military guys who, as you mentioned earlier, come out of the military. They come home, they were trained to be a killer, and now they come home and have to follow all the rules of normal society back here. And they've been made into a killing machine, but now they're supposed to just stop and drop that and be like us. And that's not possible. It's just not possible. That's not saying that they're going to kill people here. What I mean by that is they played by different rules when they were there, and that's what they were taught. It's the same with athletes. You played by different rules. You're right. Most of the people that play major league sports have always been a star their whole life. They've had to, as I said, use this robotic type of training lifestyle to get to where they've gotten to. And then suddenly, one day at 35, 36, 37, after doing this since they were 5 years old, somebody says, guess what? The next time you go on the ice, you'll be paying to play.
Yeah.
You won't be getting paid to play. You'll be paying to play in an adult league and it's unfathomable to you because somebody sits down beside you on an airplane and says, oh, hey, how are you? What do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a pro hockey player. You're a pro hockey player. Yeah, I am a pro hockey player, blah, 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 blah. Just like wrestlers and all the rest of it. Like our buddy Neil.
Everybody that meets me says that, right, Neil? They all say, yeah.
So then all of a sudden you sit down in that chair a few years later and the person says, hey, how are you? What do you do? And you say, I used to be this, and I don't know what I am now.
Yeah. I have to say something because that's what happened to me. I walked away after wrestling in Bremen, Germany, before I was going to get married. And I walked away from the business, said, nope, I'm going to have a family. I'm going to go become a teacher. I'm going to change my life and do all this stuff. And went to the career service thing. And it was so to a level that I don't think I should have done it. This is honest truth. I should have gone into something like wrestling. I should have kept on being in entertainment. I went to a normal, regular life and thought, that's what I got to do, is live a normal, regular life. And I sure as hell didn't know how to deal with it. Probably affected me in so many ways, and I could never go back to a normal, regular life again.
Yeah. But women have networks of people and friends and families and mothers and daughters. Women are so much better at these life unions and life connections. But men are used to being the rugged individualist, the solo, especially these guys. They're all the best. You've got a whole team of alpha wolf hockey players out there. That's very difficult to get these guys from being like, I'm the leader, let's go, to ask someone else, where do I go from here? That's I would imagine the biggest transition, just changing from, okay, let's go, to where do I go?
And Jack, just to add on to that, where's the piece of paper that tells me where I'm going today? Like every day I've had a piece of paper handed to me with our itinerary. You're going to practice at this time. You got a meal after that. Then the bus leaves for the airport at this time. Then the plane leaves at that time. There'll be another meal on the plane. When we get there, you'll be staying at the Sheraton Hotel. You'll get your keys at a table when you walk in. And then we're going to go and have a video session at 8:30 in the ballroom, and curfew's at 12.
Yeah.
No, you're right. There's always those roles of leadership and followership. But you're right. It's very... And I've said this, I've got my 10 rules to the men's clinic, the 10 rules to be the ultimate male. This is an unachievable ideal, like many. But it's that transition from, I always know what I'm going to do. Here's the plan. You're in warrior mode. I think that's when men are at their best. But we're at our worst. And I've been through a divorce. Neil's been through a divorce. When you get into that situation of, what do I do now? And then you start thinking, and then you start overthinking, and then you start thinking what the other people are thinking. And a lot of guys, they struggle. I'm doing a podcast tomorrow. It's called the Warrior's Way Mindset. And these guys, the guy who leads, he's getting those calls at 3 a.m. I'm sitting here with a gun and a bottle of Jack, and I don't know what to do. And that's the idea of the men's clinic, that men need men. Men need to be around other men and to get guidance from men who've been there and done that. The Wounded Warrior program is the same. And it's no matter what the field, those parallel universes that come from sports, from business, from divorce and marriage. Most of the time, the women in a divorce, your friends are your wife's friends. And then you go through a divorce.
Yep.
Where are your friends? You've become this.
I became the enemy. Everyone,
right.
If I go back to Pittsburgh, I'm considered the enemy. Like in a lot of places, everybody.
Your friends can't hang out with you because their wives won't let it. I don't want you hanging around Jack. Who knows what you guys are going to be getting in trouble with. Oh, yeah. There's so many of those transitions, and I'm a big fan of Moby Dick. And I love that my clinic is less than a mile from where Herman Melville got on the Acushnet for his voyage. And in the book, Herman Melville talks about when they when they harpoon a female whale. So these things go deep. They go deep into our genes, into our being. But when a harpoonist would hit a female whale, all the other females would gather around and try and bump her up and try and help and support and cry for her and support her. If they hit a male, the other male whales are like, see ya, dude, good luck. They bolt for their own survival. And I think it's a lot of the leave no man behind. That's a cultural thing that we're taught, because our natural instinct is to preserve yourself. And if you're a warrior and someone's going down, you don't put yourself in that harm, but you got to train yourself to be in that, to help in those situations. And I think it's very similar with any transition, what you're doing with the NHL. Because when men are thinking about these problems by themselves, they get into trouble, and they're at risk across the board, at risk for suicide, for substance abuse, for fast women and fast cars, and all the evils of the world. And we need other men around to help us through those moments.
Yes, because the thing is that you get to a point where you don't want to be in this world, this new world that you've been forced into. You don't. And an interesting story about incarcerated people that will be released and actually go out sometime later and commit another crime, to be rearrested and put back into the environment that they're comfortable in, which is the prison system. It sounds outrageous to us, but it really goes on. That really goes on, because
Yeah,
They don't know how to handle life outside of the prison, and they don't want to handle it. And I think when you say that, it rings a bell that a guy's sitting at 3 a.m. with a bottle of Jack and a gun in his hand, because even though he was such a great person, he doesn't know who he is, and he's not sure he wants to be this person. He wants to be that person that he was. And unless somebody can get to him and talk to him and say to him, dude, I'm the same guy you are. I just went through it earlier than you. You got to listen to me. You got to talk. Come on. We got to go see some other guys. It's almost like the A meetings, but we got to meet with other guys that have been through this and that can talk it through. And you're right. Women are so much better at that because that's their DNA, is to be vulnerable, talk about it, cry in front of each other. That is not what men are taught to do.
Now, especially orthopedic surgeons are known to be these macho guys, and hockey players, they're the epitome of macho guys. So now and when they were becoming macho, or when they were they never thought of it. They trained. What's the first thing you do? Go back to practice, work harder, train harder, more reps. That's easy. But when you don't know what the next rep is, what do? Do I take a class? Do I go to a meeting? Do I volunteer? What do I do? And it's got to come from within. You got to find yourself again. Who is the real me? Is the real you this hockey player? It's not a natural thing to be on a sheet of ice, of all things, and have 50,000 people cheering you on. It's a ridiculous thing when you think about it, but all their glory, all their honor, all their entire being is on that ice, and the crowd. And then when the lights go off and it's silent, now what? I can hit this puck around, but there's no one here to care about it. So why do I want to keep hitting this puck around? It's a stupid thing when you think about it. If I'm not doing it for someone else, who am I doing it for? And what do I have to do now for myself? That's I think the biggest transition. What do I need to do now for myself? And men don't usually think about themselves until they're stuck in that situation where they're lonely and they're confused and they don't have an itinerary.
And there's no instruction manual handed to you on your way out of the locker room for the last time. You might want to take this instruction book and read it before you get out there into real life. This will teach you everything you need to know. There is no book like that. No. You're just tossed out there and you're supposed to figure it out. And all the people that are living normal lives can't figure out why you can't figure it out. Well, why can't you adapt?
Exactly.
You're the great Neil Haley. What's wrong with you?
I think it has to do with, and this is the thing, any transition, Neil and Dr. Jack, any transition, any loss, any change takes a long time to deal with. And if it's so abrupt or not planned, everyone handles it differently. And you got to have a resource team around you. And you got to have somebody who's gone through it already.
Yeah.
Neil and I had this conversation. I think it was with one of my clients or companies I'm working with. Neil told the story. I said, holy cow, Neil has the same story I have, except he was in a much bigger stage than I was. But when I look at walking away from professional wrestling the way I did it, I could have kept wrestling. I just said, nope, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm that kind of person. When I decide something, I just go do it. And people are like, what? You just did this? Yeah, I made the decision. I'm gone. And it was so hard for me where I couldn't even turn on the TV to watch pro wrestling.
Yeah.
Probably still can't. And this is
now, do you also find, I think that's another very interesting point, is that we tend to be in competitive fields. Very men compete. And I do think that you mentioned about where do you go? And that's why like my 10 rules for the men's clinic are very fundamental. It's rule number 1, women choose, men compete. Rule number 2, you will lose. You need to learn how to lose. Part of being a man is to learn how to lose. And rule number 2 is you will lose, but don't quit. Keep pushing at it. Rule number 3 is the ultimate man never quits. So you've got to go back to your foundation and say, okay, this is a new challenge. I'm in a new chapter of my life. I know what to do. I don't know what to do, but I know to not quit. I know to use those basic fundamental rules in real life as I'm transitioning. And that's what I think a credo or some fundamental, those basic skills of, you're going to lose. You're not going to win every game, but you got to bounce back and you got to come back. And I think that those rules do tend to apply in real life, but it's a completely different game that you're not familiar with anymore.
I think the other thing is you talk about competitors, and certainly orthopedic surgeon is a guy who will have his head up very high. He's a prestigious person because to accomplish to be able to be an orthopedic surgeon, you've accomplished a great deal. You're at the top of society, just like the athletes, just like all these people. And so you're competitive, and you're right, you can't quit, but you have to, you got to find a way to be able to live in the moment the way that you live in the moment when you're that competitive. Because if you think about it, if you're that competitive, you cannot be living in the past and living in the future. You can't, because right now you're cutting a guy open. Right now, there's the bones right there. You can't be thinking about where am I going for dinner next week and why didn't I buy that car that I should have got 2 weeks ago? You can't, or else you're going to screw this guy up. And the same thing if you're playing hockey, playing baseball, if you're in wrestling, if you're in any of these things, you can't be thinking about what am I going to do next week, or what about my daughter? Where is she going to go to college, or this or that? You have to think about that moment. That's why I had such a great feeling as an older guy when I'd go out on the ice and play with adult guys, because it brought me back to being a kid again. I could pretend I was Bobby Orr all over again, like I used to do when I was a kid. And I think that when you get out of these great careers that we've all been in, and you have to find a way to be able to live in the moment as a normal person. And that is really hard. I found a way to do it because I had to do it. It was either live in the moment or die.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because that why do I need to do it now? There's no crowd here. What's my why? I'm not doing it for the crowd. I'm not doing it for the coach. I need to do it for me, and I need to do it for my loved ones. And that's a complete change in mindset. And like I said, with the competitive thing, there's also that I can't fail. Like, I'm floundering here. I'm struggling here. I can't fail. I'm Neil Haley. Neil Haley doesn't fail. Neil Smith doesn't fail. I can't fail. And that SOB is looking at me, waiting for me to fail. There's that do you have those support? Do you that support group?
Right.
So
how do you get that support group? Because even I'll make this comment, at least in my profession and maybe Neil's profession, how many of the guys really did hang out together? How many times were people more in a little bit of a niche group, but not a large niche group compared to the team?
No,
and you had only a couple guys you'd hang out with. In wrestling, we'd choose, okay, out of 15 guys, 2 guys we'd hang out all the time together, and the other ones we couldn't stand. A lot of times that happened in the team sport too, right?
But you still have to go out and play the game together, and you have to be there to protect each other, and you have to be there to do that, even though this isn't somebody that you want over at your house for, but you're still a guy that you need playing left wing or playing left field or doing this or doing that. Do you want him to have him over for dinner? Do you want to introduce him to your wife? Not really, but you do need him on the team. And so that's the same way. And I just want to add that the way that I was able to figure life out was my tragedy was so intense and overwhelming that I had to either figure it out or you will die. And that was the truth. Now, Neil, meaning Neil Smith, do you want to live or do you want to die? Answer the question, because you don't have much time right now and you got to figure this out, because it's either you're going to go on and live and figure out a way to do it, or you're going to die. And so that's where I started to live in the moment and started to say, I have to just put one foot in front of the other, heel to toe. I'm in a dark tunnel. It's pitch black in here. I hope I'm going to see light at the end of that tunnel at some point. And sure enough, I started to see a flicker of light, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. It took a long time. But that's when I started to live the moment as much as I could. Because nobody can completely live in the moment, or else you couldn't plan anything. I couldn't even come on this podcast if I didn't plan something. But living in the moment and not killing yourself about your mistakes of yesterday, or dreading the competition of tomorrow or what's going to come tomorrow, but living for this podcast in this moment right now. I'm here. I'm enjoying this. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner tonight. I'm not thinking about where we're going to go tonight. I'm not thinking about what I'm doing tomorrow. I'm only thinking about Jack and Neil. That's it.
Okay. Now, Dr. Jack, I think that the process when you get to talk to these men so far, as you've opened up the Ultimate Men's Clinic, you've learned a lot about men and their health, more not seeing that health journey as much as you're seeing now, what pain they're going through. What's the reason they came here? and why?
Yeah, I do think men are they're an endangered species in a lot of way. It's always men's season to cut down men, especially men who, you talk about the CEO who was caught in an affair. There's a lot of gloating going on about that. And the woman, she gets some support. That toxic man of a CEO probably pressured her into this relationship. There's always the blame of the man. And it just seems to be so ubiquitous and so prevalent in our culture. We need to go back to ourselves. We all understand that. No one else understands that being the hunted, not the hunter. And I think it's just gotten worse in our society. But that was my purpose, one of the purposes of the men's clinic. And I still work in a traditional practice as well. I do office-based. 30 years of taking call in the middle of the night was enough. And I've got my burnout stories of seeing that hamburger on the end of a leg that you have to go in and fix. And at some point, what you're doing in your 20s and 30s, at some point when you're in your 40s and 50s, you get that case and it breaks you. And you do need to transition, but men tend to transition by themselves. And to have a clinic where men can go to, or have a support group where men can go to, your group, the wounded mindset, the warrior mindset group, it's men need men, and men need to stay together for these issues because we are the ones who understand these things. And you could be enemies on the battlefield, you could be enemies on the sporting field, competitors on the same team, but we're also on the same team when it comes to the really important things that we get faced with in life. Take it away, Neil. What do you think of that?
And
I mean, I think it's so that.
Sorry, I didn't know which Neil.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Neil Smith.
I think that I'll tell you a quick story. After I lost my son, I happened to be told by a couple of times that a friend of a friend had lost one of their children. And I said, I don't know this guy, but tell him to call me. He's going to have to call me. He's got to. And the answer on both of these things was, he won't do that. He's a guy that'll want to handle it all by himself. I said, he can do that. Go ahead and do it. It'll kill you. But if you want to do it that way, go ahead and you'll die, because you're going to end up with a heart attack. You're going to end up with a stroke. You're going to end up with something. If you don't get that toxicity out of you, which is the pain and the horrible grief that's laying inside of you, if you don't get that out of you, you're going to pay for it.
Yeah,
you will pay for it.
It erodes the vessel from within, I think. And we turn our anger inward. And when we can't do something for others, you're also taught, don't hit women, don't be abusive, be understanding. Like the ideal male, the ideal man in any situation is an unachievable goal. I would see that when we used to spend a lot of time in Annapolis, and you'd see these, I say this word but jarheads. You see these guys that are Marines, 3 or 4 young 20-something guys with the Marine hairstyle on, and they're being released into this environment of cute girls and alcohol and other men competing, this competitive environment. And these men who've just spent 6 weeks wherever learning to be warriors are now released into the world and are expected to be civil gentlemen and say, yes, ma'am, and please, and thank you. And the dichotomy between the warrior and the gentleman is such it's a completely different mindset, but we're expected to be the perfect warrior and the perfect gentleman simultaneously while hugging babies and adopting a puppy. It's not achievable. Those are the expectations for men, and we all understand that pressures, but you do need to go to other men who've experienced those same things. You're not alone. You're never alone. There's someone who's always walked this path before you.
So Neil, how many years since you lost your son? I've not gotten to share that on my show, because the first time I think we just talked hockey with Greg and I. That is the hardest of losses, is losing, especially someone as close as your son. How do you still are able to go? I see you, as I've met you, I see your integrity is more powerful than any man I've ever met. I'm just telling you that, Neil, just from when I've got to know you and see that and say, wow, a leader like he is, to lead a major sports team like Neil has, and to go through what he's gone through, and now how he's giving back, how he sees so many people bigger than themselves. He's the most humble guy I've ever met in this industry, like to this level. Is that part of the whole mission of you, Neil, would you say?
I think the mission is to give. I've only got we all only have so many years here. I want to make sure that when I get judged, I'm going to be judged in a good way. And I'm going to be able to be happy with myself and who I helped on earth and here in this lifetime, and that I've been through a lot of pain, but that pain can help other people. And I've experienced something. Think about this for a second. I won the Stanley Cup in New York City in Madison Square Garden, the only time it's ever been won in the history of Madison Square Garden, in Madison Square Garden. They've only won it 4 times, and they've only won since 1926, they've only won it 4 times, and they've only won it once since 1940. That's 85 years they've had one Stanley Cup, and I orchestrated that. I can say that humbly. I orchestrated that. But I also went upstairs one night to find out what was going on with my son, my only child and my best friend in the world. Walked into his bathroom and saw a gun lying at his sink and saw blood all over the place and a hole blown through his head. I have these unique experiences. So on one hand, I've done this ticker tape parade down the Canyon of Heroes. I've signed Wayne Gretzky. I've done all those things. But I've also had the worst thing that anybody could ever go through. I don't know how you'd go through anything worse than that.
There's nothing.
Maybe if you got your whole family killed or something. But I'm just saying, so I have these experiences and I can help a lot of people in the time that I have left because I've done all these things. And I can share that and share what I've been through and help people have a better life.
Yeah. Neil, thank you for sharing. Neil Smith, thank you for sharing. That's to put yourself in a vulnerable position like that. That shows your strength. And my heart goes out to you and thank you for turning tragedy into success, into helping others, because we all go through it, and bless you for helping everyone else go through it.
Thank you. And I found out too that, and Neil can attest to this, like I don't do anything to get compensation back. I don't do anything. I don't even think about it. It's not even a thought in my mind that what am I going to get out of this? All I'm thinking about is I can do something good, and that's what I'm going to get out of it.
It's powerful, and I don't know how we met. It's crazy, and I don't know how Jack and I met. Is just by messaging LinkedIn. Yeah. But what I've learned from people is the biggest thing. I have not lost what you've lost, Neil, but I've been. Someday my story will. That's all I have to say because I know there are people listening. Someday my story will be told, and it'll be told on a high level, not for reasons of my wanting validation. That's one thing. It's going to be hopefully to help lots of people, because what we have go through as men, or anyone that's gone through some sort of loss or tragedy, and have been absolutely taken their heart ripped out of their sleeve in certain ways. We are here to help other men and other people. It doesn't matter, men or women that have gone through this, and say, you too, we have felt this pain and we're here for you.
I think it shows also that when you seek, you will find. And yeah. I think the fact that the three of us are sitting here talking to each other, what are the odds? Because we're all seeking. And, you have to continue seeking, because you will find those like people. You will find people like you, people that are also seeking. And Neil, you've said this a couple dozen times. I think us Pittsburgh guys, we talk to everyone. That's not necessarily true. The fact that me and you got together, and the fact that now Neil Smith, we're talking together, we're all seeking. And I do think to realize that you can help in these situations where you don't know what the hell you're doing. You don't know what the hell you're doing. Just seeking.
I have another client that I'm going to introduce Neil to. He is another high. He's hit the pinnacle of life and I'm not going to bring it up, but I hope to bring him on. You'd have to make sure you talk to him for hours because the guy's a talker. And I'm sure now after losing Hulk Hogan tonight, which really is hard for me not because Hulk and I even hung out, we're in one meet and greet, but I know guys just like Hulk that have gone through the thing, and to know that loss and to know somebody lose their life that was in the great shape. It's a hard thing. And we see these things all the time. So as men, we have to continue to move on. And Neil, I appreciate it. Neil's just showing this power. I booked him on another podcast after this. And I just said last minute, hey, dude, I'm going to do this. But I knew that this was a fit. And I know that Jack is going to promote what he's doing also. So I guess to close this out, I'm just going to throw it because Jack, you and I will talk for an hour, and same with Neil. Neil, best place people can find information on what you and your wife are doing and some of the other work, and also about the NHL Wraparound podcast.
Yeah, that's a fun part of my life is NHL Wraparound podcast with Vic Morin, and it's on all the platforms for podcasts, and it's also on YouTube. And my wife has a firm called Emerge-EK. If you want to look at it, it's a firm that has coaches all over the country, all over North America, that help. When somebody's in distress, they can give them somebody that will help them get through whatever their situation is. And it's not clinical work, but it's actually coaching, but it's done by clinicians. And so she's doing a wonderful thing for people. And I guess that also motivates me to do nice things for people. But Jack, if there's anything I can do for the Ultimate Men's Clinic at all, just call on me and I'll be happy to help.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Same to you. If you need anything, whatever it may be.
All right.
We're compadres now.
That was the best. That was a special simulcast of the Neil Haley Show and the Ultimate Men's Movement. Guys, take care.